This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, that sign out there today just beat the heck out of me.
I was just out there a half hour and while I was done, I was cooked.
Where at?
Yeah.
Well,
You see what I got?
I always wear a hat, but man, it was. So, man, I got. I said, I may be running late. Ran down. I didn't think it was right to be seen playing golf, not making city council.
Yes.
It's not the right thing to do. Especially running golf.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree.
Not the thing to do.
You'd have to kiss a lot of babies up there to.
Yeah, that's right. If they had a bottle of water, I just did it.
Okay, are we all ready? The August 9th council meeting be called to order. Would you please stand for the pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
So Mayor, just for note, I believe that Ms. Cahar is online this evening and Mr. Driver is not.
Okay, the first thing I'm going to do before we start the meeting is read this proclamation. Proclamation for the city of Edwardsville, Kansas. Whereas the Union Pacific Railroad has kept their engines running through the city of Edwardsville, Kansas and the United States for more than 12 decades in recognition of Union Pacific's commitment to historic preservation. And whereas the Union Pacific Big Boy 14, the only big boy steam engine still rolling the rails, and is on its second round grand tour. And whereas the restoration in a working steam engine after being retired after 20 years of service and some 1,031,205 miles to help tell the history of Union Pacific Railroad and his important place in railroad history. And whereas the Union Pacific Railroad is an integral part of the cultural and economic development of this fair city, now therefore I, undersigned Mayor of the City of Edwardsville, Kansas, do hereby proclaim August the 9th, 2021 as Union Pacific Railroad Big Boy 4014 Day in the city of Edwardsville, Kansas. And in witness thereof, wherefore I, the undersigned Mayor of the City of Edwardsville, Kansas, have hereunto affixed my signature this 9th day of August 2021. Okay, thank you. All right, first item on the agenda will be consider approval of the consent agenda, which is the minutes of the July the 26th meeting and statement of the bills paid in an amount of $301,063.27.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second. I can do that.
It is moved and second to approve the consent agenda. Would the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Stites,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar.
Yes.
Thank you. Next item, requests or comments from the public. There is nobody present, so.
Hang on.
Oh, you've got it. Okay, go ahead, Zach.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor and council members, we did have two members of the public submit written comments in. I'll read them in the order that they were received. The first from Rhonda Smiley, 10526 Richland Avenue. Does the 11% reduction in property taxes over several years correspond favorably to the 100% reduction in road surface quality in Edwardsville? I'm not aware of who might be constantly seeking reductions in property taxes, but I do know lots of people who are tired of the poor state of our roads. Is this really the way we wish to present our community to visitors, friends, developers, residents who may have the misfortune to travel through these roads. Roads are one of the few things that only the city can provide. Why don't we do it well? And I had responded to Ms. Smiley and just some additional context on the relationship between the general fund and then street projects. So we have reached out to Ms. Smiley. The next comment comes from Dan Saran, address not provided, but I believe he lives over on that section of 110th Street and State Avenue, or excuse me, Kansas Avenue. I would like the council to seriously explain why we cannot reopen the North End Fire Station in 2022 by relocating existing assets and personnel into a building that is paid off. We have a published response time of 5 minutes per the fire department's posting in weeks past. We will always have a train problem. I have lived on the North End since 1985. I had a son that was a quadriplegic and had underdeveloped lungs all his life. We now have 2 additional families that have similar needs with their children. It was a lot of comfort knowing the EMTs were located a minute away from our homes on 110th with no worries of a train delay or road closings. They have oxygen and resuscitators. These saves lives and brain damage. Like the road maintenance problem, if the budget needs to be adjusted, then look at how that could be accomplished. I asked, why cannot they be restationed in the north building by relocating the manpower and equipment that we now have operating? They had an older ambulance since they purchased a new ambulance that could be used in the North End. We know the North End is set to be greatly developed, increasing North End call volumes. This would also give some extra space in the South End Fire Station. I asked that this governing body give its citizens an official answer to this request. This is what the North End citizens want regarding public safety, a functioning fire station used as intended due to the train problem. We also want the maintenance operation moved from the entrance of our subdivision. It is a huge eyesore. Please give us a common sense response to this public safety issue. Budgets can be modified. Thank you for your time and consideration, Dan Saran.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, we'll consider authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with SA Legal Advisors, LC, for the creation of a tax increment financing development district.
Mayor, this is an item for you to consider for the creation of a tax increment financing district that we're generally referring to as the Woodin Road TIF Redevelopment District. What this would do would be to retain Scott Anderson, his company name is SA Legal Advisors LC, to create the district. What it does not do is create any area plans. It doesn't provide for any specific incentives to any individual developer. It simply sets the limits of the district. So those boundaries, it takes us through the necessary public process. There's public hearings, there's documentation, et cetera, and so forth. I know we've spoken about this in the past. A little different than the TIF district that we created to the north, in the sense of one, there you had a single property owner that was requesting a specific district, and it was tied to projects. That's really one of the big differences, just that this district would have multiple property owners. It's not tied to a specific plan at this point. It's just simply setting up the district. So then in the future, as we continue to move forward to help develop that area, I think it's generally that area of 435 and Woodin Road. That district could include properties south and north of Woodin Road. We still want to kind of tie down what those parameters should be. This one is a little different in that it would be built around that area being in a floodplain. So unlike the last TIF district where we had to go through a process of determining the area is blighted, by statute, an area that's more than 50% in the floodplain is blighted by definition. And so we don't have to go through the blight study. So again, what this does is just create that bigger district. It will probably involve multiple property owners. And then in the future, we can use that to help develop that area with specific TIF projects when those come forward, which is a completely separate action, separate process for you to consider. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
So obviously with any formation of a TIF district, there's legal costs involved. How is Scott being paid on this one, or SA Legal?
Yeah, he would initially be paid for from our Economic Development Fund, and then that fund will be reimbursed fully from TIF. So you will have TIF revenues coming in, because remember, you're still paying property tax the same as you would. Just a portion of those property taxes are allocated to the district. So probably within a year, we would be reimbursed into our economic development fund for that 10,000. There are no other eligible expenses at this point. So from the city standpoint, from a budget standpoint, it has no impact on the general fund or the general fund operations. The funds are available in the economic development fund, which is what it's set up for, and the city will be fully reimbursed.
So probably within a year, we'd put up the initial,
Probably
the
within the
initial
first or
money,
second,
and then get
property
reimbursed.
taxes are paid. Property taxes are paid. We receive payments generally twice a year.
Got it.
So it'd probably be in the summer 2022 payments.
Got it.
Happy to answer any other questions.
Said it would encompass 30 to 50 acres. That's pretty broad expanse.
Well, so just in general properties, right? I mean, you have probably on the south side, you have one parcel that's 27 acres. You have another one that's about 10. There's another parcel that's 1 to 2. We're only looking at undeveloped properties. If you look to the north, and part of it is exactly where does the floodplain go to make sure you're staying within that 50%. So on the north side, you also have basically that area in front of where FedEx is. That's also vacant at this time that could be eligible in the TIF District. And that's why I'm saying we don't have the boundaries set, because you do have to do we have to come up with the legal boundaries of that area. And we have to have the city engineer then determine that that area, at least 50% is in the floodplain, not floodway, but floodplain. Obviously, if it's in the floodway, it's also eligible, but we're talking what most people refer to as the 100-year floodplain. So we know we have probably at least 30 acres and up to 50 acres.
Okay.
And again, as we put that together, then the first thing that comes back, there is a public hearing. We have to notify other taxing entities. We have to notify the school district and the county. Obviously, there'll be discussions with property owners in that area. It doesn't impact the property owner in the sense of, doesn't make them pay any more taxes, any less taxes, doesn't change their use, doesn't change their tax status. It's just creating that district. So it's not unusual to see cities where they'll have districts that may set for, they could set for a short time, or they could set for years and years.
I make a motion to authorize city manager to enter into an agreement with SA Legal Advisor LC for the creation of a TIF district. And I'm going to add into it area known as the Woodin Redevelopment area.
I have one question, and I'm ready to second that motion, but it's not described as like the southwest corner of that intersection. It's kind of vague to me reading this. It's kind of vague as to where that is. Are we talking about south of Woodin, west of 435?
West of 435, it could be both south and north of Woodin Road.
And how far north?
Well, it would basically be the property that abuts, if you think about FedEx, so the driveway
Right.
goes in and then it creates two parcels. So if you, it would not include, for example, it's not going to include the area where KDOT is at, right? Obviously that's developed public property. And it's probably would not include the on-the-go station itself, but it could include the vacant property that's around that and the vacant property around what most people refer to as the Magni property or the old Coleman building. And then on the south side, everything that's basically from that drainage, we generally refer to as the drainage ditch there, back to the freeway. So that's the area in general that we're looking at. But the final exact parcels in legal may differ based on floodplain and potentially how somebody may want to use,
I guess I had missed in
yeah.
the previous discussions, I guess I had missed the north of Woodin Road.
It's not absolute, but if we're going to create the district, again, it's kind of like creating the city limits. I mean, you're creating the area that the district could be in. And then again, in the future, if somebody comes forth and says, I want to use, I want to use TIF for development, taxing, financing for development, I'd like to present a plan. Those plans have to come back before the city council, has to go through a public hearing process. It's a negotiated, it's not an automatic, just because you have a TIF district doesn't mean you'll ever get a penny of TIF. You have to support your
And
plan.
it's getting the most for your value, or value for your money. You're getting the
That's
most
it.
acreage and
Right.
square footage per expense.
So we'll have more details as the
I'll
process.
second the
moves
motion.
Okay, it's been moved and second to authorize the city manager in general agreement with SA Legal Advisors LC for the creation of a tax increment financing known as the Woodin Redevelopment Area. Would the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Stipe,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes,
Cahart.
yes,
Thank you. Next item would be consider special event permit application from Fastenal for the BK 5K race to take place as part of Autumn Fest 2021.
Mr. Mayor and council members, we are in stages of Autumn Fest planning. One of the items that we have two items actually here tonight for your consideration. One of them being the application for Fastenal to operate a special event 5K at the morning of the event. Let me get my notes straight. To give you a little bit of history on the proposal, so Fastenal has this 5K event, the BK 5K, that's kind of random in honor of one of their founders, Bob Kierlin. With that event, Fastenal staff actually comes in. It's largely turnkey from the city's perspective. They come in, they organize all the timers that they need. They do ask for assistance on the route, which I do have posted. It's a little bit hard to see, but you'll see the blue line starting at the rear of Fastenal where the new section of trail is. They'll go up that way, then up north into the park, out of the park heading west on Blake Street, and then up and around the center section where City Hall's at, heading down south on 4th Street to the section of trail down there, which they will connect to, and then follow that along into Riverfront Park, across Wood End, back to their starting point at Fastenal. I've ran this through the police department, and they may need some, traffic control as it relates to some of these cross sections, and PD at this point doesn't see any issues with that. We'll firm up some of those details as we get closer. But the exciting part about the proposal is that Fastenal, with this race, brings $25,000 of essentially grant funding for area community or area organizations that have some kind of benefit towards youth. We put them in contact with representatives at the school district, specifically the elementary school, Von Trent, some of the other organizations who we've worked with in the past that might have some funding eligibility for that. On top of that, they've committed $2,500 directly to our Parks and Recreation Department, specifically for the development and helping launch the Youth Fire Academy that the fire department presented to the park staff a few weeks ago, that will be rolling out as part of the 2022 recreation programming. So that's going to go a long way into getting that program off the ground, and at minimum to possibly no cost as far as this inaugural program goes. So they're being extremely generous with some of the resources they're bringing to the community. And that's kind of the history of this BK 5K race. They do this in all of the areas where they have facilities at. In Edwardsville, this is the year they want to start doing it in Edwardsville. So with that, I would recommend approving the special event permit, and I'll communicate any other questions that you might have to the Fastenal folks. They were trying to make the call. I'm not sure if they're on right now. I didn't see them whenever I just peeked over there. But if you do have questions, I will forward that to them.
I'm in total agreement with waiving the daily fee. Can we also waive the application fee?
In our code, it doesn't have that.
And they've already paid that.
Okay. I'd like to make,
Well, we technically asked for all, they weren't asking to waive anything. We asked whenever an outside group brings in an event specifically towards a city ran function that we waive those daily fees. And the daily fee in this instance would be the $25. We do it with the beer garden stuff, and we do it for something like that.
They didn't ask, right?
Correct. No, they didn't.
So my only thing that just to add to this is restaurants and some things for people to use down here.
Mm-hmm. And they will have, part of that morning event's going to be catered, and we gave them a list of both chamber members and then local businesses who might, play some kind of role in that event at the beginning too. So they're very much interested in, energizing it locally and being it kind of a, bringing it with the Edwardsville feel.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion, we approve the special event permit for Fastenal for the BK 5K walk run, waiving the daily fee of $25 per day.
Second.
It has been moved and second to approve the special use event permit application from Fastenal for the BK 5K race to take place at the Autumn Fest and to waive the $25 daily fee. Would the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Stites.
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar.
Yes.
Just would note too, as you recall, the portion of the trail that this race is starting and finishing on was part of the improvements that
Yeah.
Fastenal made during its last expansion. It's nice to see that.
Yeah. Thank you for that input, Mike. Okay, the next item on the agenda will be consider special event permit application for Outfield Beer Company to conduct alcohol sales during the Autumn Fest 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In keeping with the last item, this event is for Outfield Beer Company to conduct alcohol sales during Autumn Fest. They did this, 2019 was the first and last year they were able to do it because of the cancellation in 2020. But essentially, it's a repeat of the applications they put forth in 2019. The only difference is they would start a little bit earlier. They want to be able to sell their beer from 3 o'clock till the concert ends at the end of the day, just so it's out there, not specifically related to anything. The boundaries are set up right here. We are waiting on some information from Department of Revenue and ABC that Outfield has submitted that information and are waiting for word back. So we're asking that we approve this special event permit for alcohol sales pending everything comes back from the state. All right.
So is this also the concert venue?
Correct. So while we're on the topic, and we'll bring this up at the CPPS board as well, kind of to start forming up that the concept for it. Probably the biggest difference as it relates to the concert is that we're not going to be getting one of the larger stages that we've gotten in the past, mostly because it's a great stage. It's and the ones that they bring is really awesome. But because weather's so touch and go, we've only been able to use it one out of the last 3 years. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to use the stage that we have. So the stage will be smaller. We're going to use their same AV tech and equipment because those guys are very, they're really quick on their feet. When we had to reorganize in 2019 and move everything inside, they knew exactly what to do. So it's they bring a lot of expertise over there. But that concert's going to be closer to the community center on the city stage. And like I said, in case we need to move it inside, it's all right there. We can all stick it in there. We will have a touch a truck event. I've reached out to started to reach out to some of the industrial park folks to see if they want to have some of their equipment out. Casey Disposal's committed. We'll reach out to Magni and some of the other folks along Woodin so we can have, again, bringing that kind of local Edwardsville flavor to the event. And then in the green space to the west will be kind of the bounce house carnival aspect of it as well. So we'll present kind of how this is coming together to the CPPS board. They're kind of acting as a de facto planning committee because it's as a community festival, it's a public space. And then once they're have been given the once over on that, then we'll really start ramping up some of the sponsorship solicitations and just advertisement for the event.
There's also a company down there on Woodin, Call Valley that you might want to reach out to also.
I'll see if I know anybody on that
All
end.
right,
Yeah.
thanks. I make a motion to authorize a special event permit for Outfield Beer Company to conduct alcohol sales during Autumn Fest 2021.
I think it's also a request.
Oh yeah, to waive the daily fee for this as well.
And also waive the daily fee.
Second.
It has been moved and second to approve the special event permit application for Outfield Beer Company to conduct alcohol sales during Autumn Fest 2021 and to waive the daily fee. Would the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Stites,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Cahar.
yes,
Thank you, Zach. Okay, next item on the agenda is consider authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Stantec Consulting Services, Inc. for the Riverfront Park redevelopment project.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we brought this up and the CPPS board is pretty well aware of this project and we've kept this group updated kind of as it went along. But to summarize, so in 2019, the city council adopted the Parks and Rec master plan that was put together by WSU Public Policy Management Center. Part of that presented a concept of the development of Riverfront Park based on some of the outreach efforts that they had done at the time. It was largely, here's what we're hearing from folks and here's what can fit based on that concept. So it wasn't overly scientific. That concept was kind of batted around at the CPPS level. We also issued a community survey via utility bills as well as online, specifically asking folks for their input on the development of Riverfront Park. We actually got a pretty healthy response from that from all around the city. So over 200 responses all told, offering their input into that. From there, we being the CPPS board and city staff, put together an RFQ solicitation that is kind of meant to put a finer point on how we want this project to come together, and then eventually move on to construction documents and project management of actually building the park. The first step in that was the RFQ process. We got about 8 responses to that. From those 8 responses, we selected 5 finalists to come and do an interview with myself, the Parks and Rec supervisor, the city planner. Councilmember Malat was on the interview panel, as well as Edwardsville Elementary principal Tracy Johnson was there too. So we kind of got as many stakeholders as we felt was appropriate at that point. From that interview, kind of 3 finalists emerged. There was kind of a grading rubric that helped us, attach a quantitative value to those responses. From that process, Stantec was kind of emerged as our consensus pick to move forward in this process. Kelly Van Elders from Stantec is here if you have questions of him. If I were to speak personally, and Councilmember Malat may chime in as well. But Stantec came in with a good understanding, of the timing and attention that riverfront projects need. They've done similar projects like this before in the state and along this particular river. They came in with an understanding that external funding and seeking external funding is going to be kind of key in making sure this moves forward. So they had already identified certain funding revenues that may be eligible. This project may be eligible for as it kind of firms up and we have a better idea of the concept. I think they came with an understanding of the current staffing levels that we've got to work with, and weren't presenting anything that was really outside the scope of what our current staffing levels could maintain. They also came with a good, their design aesthetic that they brought seemed like something that they demonstrated they were able to tailor that to specific communities to kind of bring out that local flavor of the actual park site that they're developing. And so that could be anything from, climbing sculptures that are indicative of the region. It could be historical signage, things like that. So their total package was kind of hit a lot of the marks that the interview panel was looking for and spoke to a lot of the items in the RFQ. The presentation that I'm giving right now is a request to essentially fund that first phase of the project, which would get us through that kind of firming up the concept. It includes a public engagement piece of it, so that way, the people involved know how this is coming together, the resident stakeholders, I should say. We don't want to spend, and this was communicated, we're not going to spend too much time on additional surveying and community outreach because we already did that through WSU, and then we already did it in-house through our own surveying efforts. So Stantec is really ready to kind of hit the ground running on starting to take the concepts and the input that we've already got and put together a final design plan that would work for the area. That gets us up to the point of development of construction documents and management of that project. So it gets us right up to that point, which would probably be sometime at the second quarter of 2022. So right around when we're talking about budget priorities for the fiscal year 2023. As we'll touch on it later in the budget presentation, but the American Rescue Plan Act seems to, in some of the webinars I've been involved with, it seems like some of the costs for this project and, broadly speaking, park and public spaces project might be eligible for those funds. So it may be, that might be a funding source that we could take advantage of at that time. Right now, what we're asking is that council authorize the city manager entering into final contract negotiation with Stantec to enter into that contract for the amount of $41,000 to be paid for out of the special sales tax fund. The special sales tax funds did have money allocated in this budget, so it does have the fund balance to support it. And the use of those funds was previously approved by the CPPS board. So if you have questions specific to me or to, like I said, Stantec, I'll stand for those now.
I have a question, and either one that knows the answer can answer. When you talked about additional funding mechanisms that you have identified, would you mind speaking to that a little bit, and whether it be state funding, federal funding, or what you've identified that might be an avenue we can go down?
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. My name's Kelly Van Elders with Stantec, and we look forward to working with you as well as the stakeholders that have been identified to be on the committee for the project. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Land and water conservation funds are a really good source. The 2021 applications are already probably full and delegated out. So, but starting in 2022 and beyond are the funds we would first start with looking at for funding under their particular fund. That's the most accessible, and it has the most, in a riverfront park, the most boxes we can check. So I can see we can get maximum funding there. It is a match, so just be aware that it's a 50-50 match fund. So that is important to know going into it, not to propose too much that you couldn't match. So we'll be federal or state? That's federal. But it's issued through the state. So KDOT typically will distribute those because they're structured to distribute funds like that. And then National Park Service actually has, they've received some good funding lately, and so they're investing in communities in different ways. One potential here could be to capitalize, you're already on the water trail map, but to actually capitalize on it and get some funding, maybe for the docks or enhancement of the ramp, something like that, fishing opportunities as well. So we'll look at those sources. We have an expert in-house, her name's Heidi Pepper. That's all she does, is she identifies funds for communities specific to whatever project we're working on. She's part of our team, and she'll be involved in the project, identifying other opportunities as well. But those are just two good examples.
Well, I definitely agree that we're missing an opportunity to take advantage of a natural asset that we have in our backyard, and whether it be a restaurant overlooking or all the different ideas that I'm sure that you all went over, but we should be utilizing that river, and I look forward to seeing what.
Yeah, exciting is you're one of the few, if maybe the only community that actually has a ramp on the north side. All the existing communities currently are on the south side of the river. So another thing to kind of take advantage of as we move through this. Any other questions?
Oh, sorry. Someone else speaking.
Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mayor. It seems like some of the scope of work is redundant to what WSU did previously. Is there some items we can take off of this current scope to save us some in our budget that we've already had surveyed and done through WSU?
Well, the WSU didn't really do a lot of actual surveying work as it relates to that specific site. What WSU did was it was more broad in their approach, really taking a look at the entire park system as a whole versus specifically the Riverfront Park. So, but to your point about eliminating redundancies, that speaks to my earlier comment about we don't need to do a lot of additional community engagement, additional surveying of people, but we do want to have some aspect of once these we've got WSU kind of gave us a plan of what would fit based on the engagement that they had done. What this is going to do is put a finer point to it and say, this is what here's concept A of what we want to do. Here's concept B, what we want to do, and really not be as broad as the WSU effort earlier. And so once we get to that point and we have, concepts that we do want to bring forward, I think we definitely want to involve the residents in that, so they are aware of, how that project is coming together. But it's not as robust in the additional surveying and community outreach piece as the WSU effort was.
I had one other question as well. When they're looking at alternative funding for the project, are they going to look at private partnerships with businesses in the community who might want to partner and maybe be a part of? We could advertise, hey, Fastenal or whoever was a part of building this project. I believe that could be a write-off for businesses in the community.
I'll turn it over to Kelly to answer that, but I believe they have specific experience in that kind of sponsorship in previous projects. So,
yeah, we'll look at every avenue there is to team up on a project. So if a P3 is if you got community investors already that you're aware of, obviously those are the first ones we want to talk to and see what kind of level of interest they have, what type of maybe they have an interest in fishing or picnicking or whatever it is, and then if we could bring them on and sponsor certain improvements, we're certainly happy to do that. There's also the opportunity to there's a company that we work with, and they weren't on this team, but we have pretty good access to them to kind of pick their brain when we need to on public-private partnerships and structuring, how to operations and maintenance, and making sure we don't propose anything that you all can't maintain down the road. That is part of our scope to do as well. But they also, beyond that, if we want to go beyond the scope at some point, maybe in phase 2, they have developer contacts throughout the country, and they have specific ways to structure agreements for P3s. I'll just give you an example. About 10 years ago, I worked with City of Shawnee, and if you're aware of the Holiday Sand Quarry on the very far west side of town, we came up with a P3 idea for the city and Holiday Sand to team together. And what we did is we wanted to fund the park improvements and the infrastructure for when the quarry was done being used. So we came up with a 10 cent per ton sold of really didn't call it tax, but it's just a fee that goes into a trust fund. Then over the life of that quarry, that 10 cents obviously builds up after that many tons are sold. And we anticipate about $1.5 million to $2 million will be available to invest then in the park through that. So we'll come up with creative uses if that makes sense for this park as well. That's just an example.
I would also just add that we have the pieces together. We just haven't really pulled the trigger on the creation of our community foundation. If you recall, we have a development agreement that has a component in it that would have funded our community foundation. So community foundation there's the Kansas City Foundation, which is a very broad, large group, and then you set up under that local foundations that has its own local board, local organization. So that can be set up fairly quickly, and so that's in play. It's just not funded at this point. And part of the reason to use a community foundation is oftentimes, of course, there's been change in tax laws, but you can give to a foundation easier than you can say give to a city or give to some other organization. So it provides that tax exemption or that nonprofit type of organization. Cities are, while we don't make profits, we're not considered a nonprofit under tax codes. So the foundation is another mechanism to use both for receiving dollars and expending those dollars with really the private sector and some other organizations that will give to something, but they need a foundation. It's what we did effectively when we built the trail system, when we extended it from basically the Riverfront Park area to up here towards City Hall, we got a grant through the county, through the casino grant program. And we used Mid-America Regional Council as the applicant and the foundation as our mechanism to accept those funds, because they couldn't make the funds directly to the city. So that is just another mechanism we have in play.
I was also wondering if the group could tell us how successful they've been in receiving these grants. I know we'd apply for a lot of them, but do you guys typically get those grants? Is that something we can count on, or is that just a shot in the dark?
Yeah. You know, what a lot of these applications involve is, you know, what's the economic assessment of the community. So I think Edwardsville, with the population and it's set up the way it is, I think you're going to qualify much sooner and quicker than a lot of the bigger communities that have, you know, much broader, diverse populations. So I think you're set up well for that. I can't quote you a number. I'd have to have Heidi Pepper here to give you solid examples of the ones that have come through. I know that we just came off of some brownfield projects. One of them's in Topeka. We're doing another one in Manhattan and another one in Raleigh County. So I don't know if there's any brownfield at this particular site, but that's certainly a lot more success rate if we could maybe look at that. And that's something we'll just talk about later, if that's a possibility. But if we need to give you some more, you know, real concrete examples, we could have Heidi pull those together for you and give you specific examples if that helps.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion authorizing city manager to enter into a contract with Stantec Consulting Services for the Riverfront Project Riverfront Park redevelopment project with the maximum of $41,000.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and second to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Stantec Consulting Services, Inc. for the Riverfront Park redevelopment project in the amount of $41,000. Would the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Stites,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Cahart.
Yes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is consider ordinance number 1043, adopting the 2021 standard traffic ordinance for Kansas cities.
Okay, well, we'll have, yes, two different items.
I was just
No,
going to
we'll
read
do
one at a time.
That's
Okay,
fine.
Yeah.
I would like to say why Kelly is here and Zach is, this has been a, you know, pretty big project. Zach has really taken the lead on this. There was some great applications, RFQs submitted. I think the CPPS board and then the group that reviewed them just did a really excellent job to bring it to this point, and the engagement involvement that they've had, you know, with the broad spectrum of the community, I think is, you know, Mr. Stites pointed out, and I think it's been something I've seen and others have seen, you know, utilizing river assets is really a great opportunity. And I learned tonight, I didn't really think about it, we have the only ramp on this side of the river. I've been to a couple of the other ones and I never really thought about that. So I'm looking forward to being a small part of that. And just again, want to thank both of you gentlemen for your hard work, and Mr. Malott for the work that you did serving on the committee. Thank you.
With that, I'd like to mention that one thing that led me to the favoritism of them is the fact that they're pretty aware of the river, especially in this area. And I think that they can figure out a way of tying things kind of together, so you can go to one and you can go down to the other one. And there's a bunch of them to go to that I wasn't even aware that were on that river. So they brought a lot of things to light that I did not know about. So, and I think a lot of people will realize this when they see this come together. So thank you for that. And Jack, for your coordination of that.
So, probably, we've had a few people swim in the river here, as both of our chiefs will attest. It, unfortunately, it generally has not been a good outcome. So we would not recommend that one. So Mayor, I'm going to kind of touch on, we do have two separate actions, one related to the standard traffic ordinance, which is Ordinance 1043. The second one is the Uniform Public Offense Code, which is Ordinance 1044. As you know, annually, we bring these forth to the city council. These are effectively the codification of standard traffic ordinances, which deal with all the things that police officers deal with as it relates to anything you would think of in traffic, everything from speed limits to seat belts to all types of uses. The Uniform Public Offense Code is incorporated. Again, it covers kind of a broad spectrum of offenses. And as you've seen in the past, it can cover, any number of things from property types of things to, generally it is related to property. Maybe it's a public offense like public intoxication, things of that nature. So these two codes basically been around since 1980. Again, the purpose is so you have uniformity with, you have uniformity in the code. So if you're in Edwardsville, Kansas, or you're in Topeka, Kansas, or you're in any number of cities across the state, generally speaking, those ordinances are uniformed across the state. The one exceptions are that each city has an opportunity to take certain sections of that code and put it in place for its general purposes, which we have done for many, many years. This year's ordinances do not include any new changes. So what you're seeing in these ordinances is exactly what we had last year. So I know we had a great deal of discussion. So there is no new changes. Pretty much all of the changes in both the Public Offense Code and the Standard Traffic Ordinance were legislatively mandated. So they're bills that were passed, either Senate bills or House bills, that establish various rules that local governments are to meet. And so it's really, every year the legislature meets. After the legislature meets, they put together the UPOC and the STO, and then cities have to adopt them. And once they're adopted, then these become the new STO and UPOCs that we operate under. I'd be happy to answer questions. I know both of our chiefs are here, probably the police chief. Most of this would apply to his area of expertise, but we'd be happy to answer any questions. But again, it's really state statute and the items that we exempt out of are exactly the same as last year. There are zero changes. Be happy to answer questions.
Hey, Mike, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering if this is time sensitive or if it would be all right. I know you said there were no changes, but there were some state statute changes, and I was hoping to actually read through the 160-page document before we voted on it, and I haven't had time since the couple days that I received it to go through all 160 pages. Is it time sensitive, or would it be all right to vote on this in 2 weeks?
Well, it's not time sensitive. So we continue to operate under the existing code as adopted. So whatever we have, the existing codes there, there could be some items where there's been a statutory change and that statute's gone into effect. And in that case, we would be bound by whatever that statute requirements are. So for example, if they changed a fine related to a certain type of offense, and our fines were different dollar amounts, we would have to be subject to the new statutes. Other than that, I don't know if the city attorney or the police chief have anything to add to those things, but as far as timing, I know you did get the summary pages that we put out there, and I think we sent to the whole council the full thing. But so it's completely your call.
My opinion is if somebody wants to take the time to look at it and look it over closely, that 2 weeks is not an issue, and I make a motion that we table it until the August 23rd meeting.
Okay,
And it-
I want to clarify, do you want both issues? Okay,
That's what I was
Okay.
gonna ask. Items 7 and 8.
okay.
So in that motion, I would be including item 7 and 8, which would be city ordinances number 1043 and city ordinance number 1044.
Thank you. If I will say, Ms. Cahart, any member of the council, if as you read through that, there are questions, you can direct those to me. And then as necessary, I will get with whoever the appropriate person is, whether that's city attorney and or the police chief and or any other LKM or whoever that might be. So just feel free to reach out to me and
I would
we'll move from there.
request that the person that made the motion to designate August the 23rd rather than just say 2 weeks, okay? Oh, you did, I'm sorry, I didn't think it, okay.
You had
didn't-
mentioned it. I didn't.
I
hear
didn't
totally.
hear
August
it, but I
23rd,
just-
yes.
Okay, all right.
I'll second it.
Carolyn has seconded, okay. Okay, there's been a motion and a second to table items number 7 and 8 until the next council meeting, August the 23rd. Would the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Stites,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Okay.
You were gonna do it.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Next item on the agenda is to hear a presentation regarding 2021 quarterly budget review and consider setting the maximum fiscal year 2022 budget and calling for a public hearing August the 23rd. You're up, Zach.
Zach's going to take the first part of this on the budget review portion, and then I'll do the summary of the 2022 budget. So he'll do the quarterly update, and then I'll do the budget.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, so this is part of our, we've been doing this for a number of years now, just essentially providing a quarterly budget update as far as how budget is performing in the year that it's in. So this will be a report on the first 6 months, and in some cases, the first 7 months worth of data that we've got. So we're going to start with our major forms of revenues, which we typically define as revenue streams over 100,000. Property taxes, nothing really to report there, nothing out of the ordinary. We did come in really, there was a large delinquent payments actually came in pretty strong in 2021, which was a pattern across all of the taxing entities in Wyandotte County. It appeared that for whatever reason, that seemed to have leveled off. Typically at this point in the year, we're at 96% of total collection, and that's exactly where we're at right now. We've got 2 more property tax distributions coming in September and October. So again, property taxes continue to perform pretty much exactly as the budget assumed. For sales taxes, we actually have sales tax information for the first 7 months. So in the effort to give you guys as much up-to-date information as we can, we're presenting that data instead of the first 2 quarters. And on the sales tax front, as I've mentioned in the past, it continues to perform pretty strongly. As you can see in the graph, this is January through July sales tax collections going back to 2016, so the previous 5 years. We are typically at, and so not only are we above kind of where that average number is, which is 826,000, right now we're sitting at 977,000. But in relation to how the budget performs at year end, we're also trending higher than what our budget estimates. So typically at this point, we're at 57, or at July, I should say, we're at 57% collection of what ends up being our audited total. Right now, we are at 67% collection of our budget, which means we're performing 10% higher than where we would assumed we would be at the end of the year. That's pretty encouraging. We certainly did not budget as aggressively in August 2020 in sales taxes because everything was so up in the air, but it's encouraging to look at that these numbers continue to perform strongly. City sales taxes, specifically, the city sales taxes generated in Edwardsville, those are really performing largely in keeping with the trend lines that have been established in previous years that we've looked at. But on the use taxes in the city and then the use taxes in the county, those are way above where the trend lines typically are. Wyandotte County sales tax too is performing in line with those trends, a little bit above where those trend lines are at, but not as significant as the use taxes. So right now we're not really projecting. We still want to be conservative. This is looking to be kind of a record year as far as sales tax collection goes. I don't think it would be very prudent to go back and budget another record-setting year. What we're doing as far as projections for fiscal year 2022 is essentially assuming that these sales taxes are largely flat, and if it performs better, then we're all the better for it. That's kind of been our motif the last couple of years, and it's paid off. Quarter 1 through quarter 2 franchise taxes. Currently, we're at 49% of revenue collected throughout the year. Right now, we're a little bit behind that. Not too alarmed. The budget assumed $520,000 in revenue. In our estimates, we pared that down a little to, I believe, $510,000, maybe $505,000. But it's nothing overly concerning at this point. The 2018 performance kind of threw off the averages for the other years, but I think the 2020 and the 2021 performances are going to be, pretty stable going forward in how we predict those. Those are post the Evergy and KCP&L merger. So it's taken this long for some of those figures to stabilize. So we have a good sense on the clip that this revenue stream performs at. And I think that unless, barring any other shakeup like that, I think we've largely got a handle on how this will perform. Nothing majorly concerned right here. We pared down estimates just slightly, but nothing overly statistically significant. Gaming revenue, this is another one. We have data from January through July. Gaming revenue started off slow at the beginning of the year, obviously, and it is starting to pick up and really perform as it was prior to 2020. You'll see that we're just under that average of where we typically are at this point in the year. We're at 223,000, a little bit less than 223,000, I should say. So we're kind of right at where that average tends to fall. The good thing about that is because, again, with the uncertainty of this revenue stream, when we adopted budget, we budgeted pretty conservatively in the gaming revenue area. So we are outperforming by another 10% than what we thought we would be doing in gaming revenue so far. So we're probably not going to hit that, that 405 to 410,000 mark where we used to hit, but we're going to likely outperform where our budget assumed that we would. So we'll land in the middle, outperforming original conservative budgets, but not quite yet to our normal levels that we were expecting and could count on in years prior to 2020. Court fines, just to remind you, we use kind of a running 5-year average to estimate adopted revenues for court fines. That helps us account for some of those big years and some of those down years. We're performing a little bit stronger than where we typically are this year as it relates to our adopted budget. We're at 52% of our adopted revenue at this fund, where we're typically at 50% of what the audited figure comes out at. This estimate has been paired up a little bit. I think we're at 388,000 for the estimated revenue in this line item. So again, nothing too out of the ordinary in court fines at this point. Ambulance fees, we're currently at 104,000 about, so we're outperforming that average over the last 5 years. And again, we're at 58% of where our adopted budget would put us at. Where typically we're at 51% of whatever the total ends up being. So I know Ben's done a lot of work in shoring up that whole process. So this is, I believe, we're at a higher revenue rate at this point with less actual bills being sent out. So that's, he just confirmed for people who can't hear. So we're sending out less bills, but getting a higher return back because some of the work that he's done behind the scenes and changing up that processes and some of our partners in it. So that looks to be, again, I think we're going to get to a point where that's largely stabilized. It's not a lot of variability built in there like you saw in 2019 where there was that big dip. So ambulance fees continues to perform strongly. Again, a lot of that is just how the ability of people to pay, but some of that is some of the background work that the city staff and specifically the deputy fire chief has been doing to stabilize that revenue. Motor vehicle taxes, we adopted the budget 158,000, or excuse me, that's in, yeah, 158,000. We are performing stronger than that. We typically do perform a little bit stronger than that. These are estimates that given us from LKM, and those are always a little bit conservative. So right now, those seem to be performing a little bit higher than where we had budgeted at, which is, again, that's very good. All told, general fund revenues are, I think we're a product of, the unique situation economically that Edwardsville is positioned at, where we're not as dependent on some of the more volatile revenue streams as some other small communities. But we also have consistently brought a conservative approach to revenue estimates. So between those two factors, 2020 has actually been pretty favorable to us from a revenue standpoint. Typically at this point in the year, we're at 65.1% of where our final revenues are at. We're at 73.5% of where our budget assumed where we would be at. So in the previous budget discussions that we've had, we're showing and we're estimating, anywhere between that $300,000 to $400,000 in additional revenue that we didn't assume that we would get because of when we adopted the budget. That's kind of just a victim of the calendar. At this point in the year, 2 quarters and sometimes 6-7 months into it, it's bore out that we're outperforming those benchmarks that we assumed that we would be at as far as a revenue collection standpoint. Some of those we don't have a lot of control over, and it's just these external factors that we're and different shoes that we're waiting to fall into place. But at least at this point in the year, we're performing pretty well. Now, this has happened before in 2018, where the trajectory was up, and up, and then it kind of dropped off and leveled off on levels that were lower than the trend lines. So we're still being, we're proceeding cautiously as far as estimates go, but all indicators at this point seem to be largely positive. And to couple that with our general fund expenses, so this has got our broad level look at it. Typically, we're at 50% of our audited expenditures at this point in the year. We're at the low end of that. So we're at 49% of where our expenditures are at, or 49% of our adopted expenditure level, I should say. So that's a testament to our department heads really holding the line on budgeted activity, playing within the goalposts that the budget document established for them. A lot of discipline brought into, especially at the beginning of the budget year when there was so much uncertainty. So, I mean, this graph really is a testament to the discipline and the different strategic things that our department heads are doing to control spending. And right now, we're really on track to hit exactly where budgeted expenditures put us at, and possibly even come in under budget from an expenditure point of view. So to summarize, on the general fund side, we assumed a spend down in fund balance because we weren't sure on revenues, and we held the expenditures largely flat. Right now, it's looking like we're actually going to add to the fund balance, like I said, by about $300,000 or $400,000, which kind of plays into some of the budget activity that we want to take advantage of that in our fiscal year 2022 budget that the city manager will get to shortly. Other funds and expenses, or other funds, the revenues and expenses, not a whole lot of things or items of concern at this point. Debt service, the revenue coming in, that's property taxes, that's some pilot payments. We do have some principal and interest payments to pay that'll still hit later in the year. So, we'll hit that expenditure mark right on, and we'll likely exceed our estimated revenues by just slightly. Special sales taxes, not a whole lot to report out of here. We do have our leases associated with the fire department that still need to hit. The surface seal project is budgeted out of the special sales tax, so that's about another $120,000, as well as the just now approved Riverfront redevelopment contract. That'll hit this budget this year. So this one may actually go over budget as far as expenditures go, just slightly. Largely the reason for that, it's all been budgeted activity at this point. Probably the most major difference for the special sales tax fund, if you remember, earlier this year we bought a Parks and Rec vehicle. Rather than leasing that vehicle, the fund balance in this fund was healthy enough to support just buying it outright. So that eliminates some of those interest payments. But that's really that's what that $33,000 represents, is the purchase of that Parks and Rec vehicle. that's only going to hit this budget and, no payments going forward. Special Highway Fund, not a whole lot to report on that front. We will have a debt payment. This will be we brought it up before in the past. We've moved $125,000 to Special Highway Fund to help fund the debt. That still needs to hit this year. That's not budgeted in 2022 because those funds are going to be reallocated to street projects, but that will hit the budget in 2021. And we also have the surface seal striping program is going to be paid for out of the Special Highway Fund, so that the $30,000 to $35,000 will end up being reflected here. Economic development, there's literally been no change in activity in this fund since the last quarter. I think that $2,100 amount is some contract fees for, I'd have to look and see exactly who it went for, but that was in the budget, or excuse me, in the report on the last expenditure update. So really nothing of interest or of note to elaborate on in economic development. The solid waste fund, we're currently at about 57% of expenditures. We're at 50%. That's largely because we did have some 2020 expenditures that bled over into 2021 as we kind of hashed out, what exactly we owed Waste Management as they closed out their contract. So that's why those expenditure levels are a little bit higher. Right now, we are going to be likely bringing forth a recommendation for a 2% increase in solid waste fees for 2022. That's to keep pace with the contracted increases that we've got included in the Casey disposal contract. So if you remember, we did a really slight increase, I want to say about maybe even less than 1% in rates last year as we were transitioning to Casey disposal, but we'll likely bring forth the consideration of a 2% increase in the solid waste fund. Sewer fund continues to perform really, really healthily. At this point, we're not anticipating bringing forth any recommendations to adjust sewer fees next year. So that'll be the second year in a row that we've not increased any sewer fees. So that fund continues to perform pretty well. I'll knock on wood, but we set our expenditure level in the sewer fund, kind of assuming there's going to be a major repair here for $60,000, some contracted work to bird dog an issue. Those have not, again, knock on wood, those have not come to bear. So we usually do not reach that expenditure level, but it's good to have it in there, and it's good to carry a fund balance in the sewer fund in case those repairs and emergencies do spring up. We have the resources there to address them without, having to scramble and find revenue sources for them. That's the kind of the first 2 quarters in a nutshell. So if you've got any questions for me, I will entertain those now. And if not, I'll turn it over to the city manager for the budget update.
He always gets to give all the good information out there, doesn't he? So I do want to reiterate what Zach said. We're very fortunate to have a good group of department heads that are sitting here in this room tonight, and those that work with them. As I've said before, the budget is just part of a bigger process that's ongoing year round. So while we adopt a budget once a year, it takes all year to make everything work out. So we're very proud to have that. And I've really appreciated Zach's work on these quarterly reports. He's in his office and he's got 2 screens up and he's got stuff, and Sean's over there and he's got 2 screens up, and I don't know how to make 2 screens work on a computer, but these guys have it down. So we're very fortunate to have their background. So really what tonight's discussion around is really 2 items that we do coming out of tonight. That is setting the maximum budget, so what the totals would be the maximums, and setting the maximum mill levy for consideration. So both of those items then come back to you in 2 weeks for the public hearing portion of the process. And as you remember, we also have the public hearing around the revenue neutral rate, which again is already scheduled for the 23rd. So tonight, most of this is going to be spent around whether those maximum budgets in each of those funds, and then address questions that you may have. So again, you know, we've used these critical success factors for a number of years. I think as we talked about maybe earlier this year, that probably after the election's over, you know, when there will be sitting a new mayor and at least one new council member, that it'll be an excellent time for us to come back together and kind of reassess these through a council work session. And I think that'll be, you know, a valuable time to spend together. I won't hit all of those other than to say, you know, a lot of what we look at here in the budget is really long-term thinking, right? So it's not about how do we pay for, you know, the widget tomorrow, but really how are we investing in our community for the betterment of the whole community throughout the year and years and decades. And I think we've been doing that for many, many years and continue to do so. I know this has been some discussion around mill levies. Again, we've talked both about mill levy and about tax impact. So those can be different. So the impact upon the taxpayer, what's their tax burden versus their mill levy. You know, generally speaking, the direction that's been given to staff is to look at this mill levy, try to push these mill levies down. We've been fortunate as our, especially our industrial base decisions that were made 10 years ago. We have those businesses coming off of the tax, the IRB, and coming on to the tax roll. So that helps strengthen our tax base. And remember, about, you know, almost 70% of our taxes are paid by the industrial commercial customers, and only about 30 from the residential, 30%. Very different than many communities. I mean, many communities, the base of revenues are coming more from the residential and less from the commercial. So as we're presenting the budget tonight, it does include a 1 mil reduction in the mill levy. So I'm going to go through these by funds. I'm going to hit the highlights. Again, as we go forward, we can address any specifics. There's nothing new between what was presented to you 2 weeks ago and now as far as the policies, but we are proposing an overall budget. Again, budget's really based on the expenditure side of about 6.6 million, with the revenues coming in at about 6.5. I think as you heard earlier, you know, we've had really strong sales tax growth, and so we probably will outperform in a number of areas, but we've generally taken a fairly conservative approach on our revenue sides. We feel like a little bit of spend down on the on our reserves is fair at this point. It keeps us just around the $1 million mark, $900 million, which is 15% of our reserve. So that's where we've been working on. It does include basically 2 or 1.5 staff members, 1 in the police department, 1/2 in admin that would work primarily for court, and also to help in office administration, utility billing, some of those things that kind of peak and flow. But court has been the primary area where it's really been a challenge over the years. We have set aside about $50,000 for public improvements around those facilities that get used a lot, like our community center. If you've been over there, we get a lot of use. We're getting more use of that, but it needs basic things like replace the gutters on the back of the building, painting, lighting, landscaping, some of those types of things. We've had a very strong support for our cemeteries, been making, I think, very good improvements there. As you know, last year there was added an employee into the parks budget to help in the overall maintenance. We are looking to do more with contractors. So quite honestly, things like grass around this building, we believe that contracting is really a more efficient use, and therefore we can use our public works and park staff to stay focused on things that are harder to contract out. So if you're talking about the cemetery, it's easy enough to do the mowing and the trimming, but maintaining the flower beds or fixing the flagpole or making sure the trash gets empty, those are better served by our people doing it. Again, we approved a compensation plan that put 13 steps. We're leaving that in place. Fundamentally, we're moving people 3%, the step increases. We are adjusting basically two groups, are what we refer to today as our driver operator or master firefighter. So as you recall, that was a discussion a couple of months ago. So right now, all of our firefighters are in one band, but we've always had the driver operators as a step up. So those will move up 2 grades. And the second one was around police officers, where again, you saw through the pay studies that we were not competing, especially at the officer level. We're not making pay grade changes to other ranks, but there are some adjustments just in general pay. Some of that just because we've had turnover. So you have a new employee coming in where you had an employee. We have some, not vacancies, but vacant positions in the sense of MPOs, our master patrol officers. So we'll have some people moving there. So we budget for all of that, but just that's the overall highlight in the general fund. I believe there was a question that we trying to answer here, which is always difficult, about how does it change in the general fund from year to year? As you see, fundamentally, there's not many changes. The biggest change is in payroll, as you might expect. There's really the 3 big issues. The 3 biggest issues is obviously adding the 1 person in the police department, which is about a $75,000 price tag. That's the all-in. Mill's about 82,000, right? So roughly, we're adding the part-time person, right? So that's those are both new. And our planner, so there's some questions about that. So in the past, our planner was funded partially in economic development, partially in the general fund. As you know, it was a contracted position. And then all of his expenses when he was doing planning work was in the general fund, but we had some offsetting revenues for those things that could be offsetted. So we now are budgeting that position fully in the general fund, which is really where it should be, right? Again, the economic development fund really is focused on these economic development things. While he does do some work in that area, unlike the contractor, he's here every day, 8-hour days versus part days. So there is some increase as it relates to the general fund, but for the most part, it's more or less a wash. There's probably about a $10,000 swing between what we were paying for a contract person that was here part-time and a full-time person that's here doing not just planning, which that's his primary focus, but I think most of the departments will tell you he's been helpful. We've implemented GIS, a lot of for example, on our streets that are out for bid, he helped prepare the materials as far as locations and those types of things. So I think it's well dollars spent. Most of the rest of them are really just on all the other items are just really adjustments up or down, mainly market. The other thing in payroll and benefits, which happens, every year, obviously you have the 3% pay increase, but every year capers is different. We know workers' comp. Workers' comp goes on a 3-year cycle. So we had many, many good years, and we had 2 years where we had 2 injuries that both were fairly significant injuries. And so we dropped off all the good stuff, and we only have 2 years, and then we have a good year. It'll lend its way back out, but that was about almost a 30% change in our workers' comp. So 20%, I'm sorry. So I think we're gonna have $30,000 swing or so for that. So again, it's not unusual. I mean, health insurance continues to adjust, though I think we've done a really great job. I think last year we only had around a 3% increase in health. I think our employees understand the value of it and are really doing a good job of managing their health care. I mean, it used to be, 20, 30 years ago, you got your policy, went to the doctor, you paid your $10, everybody was happy. You now have to manage that, and I think our folks are doing good. Again, most of the other stuff is really just a typical adjustments. The cost of items going up or cost of items, they don't generally go down. We, again, put some money in here under capital outlay that we've just talked about trying to upgrade our facilities, existing facilities. So the community center, some of the parks, some of those types of things. On the debt service fund, again, as we've talked about, we kind of, as far as our debt payments, we hit kind of our peak and we're going down. We're recommending to hold that mill levy constant to prevent the having an up and a down when you issue debt. It's better to keep a constant level rate. It'll build some fund balance in there. We know that we have projects such as the 98th Street project that we'll be funding here in the next year or two, as far as going out and issuing debt for the actual road construction. Imagine we'll have other road projects, other facilities, other things that we need to look at. Some have been talked about tonight, such a public works facility or things like that. So we can quite honestly get that out of that building up north and have it in a more appropriate place. So we will build a little bit of fund balance in there, but there's no major changes in debt service. It's all funded. That portion of debt service that is related to sewer. Again, we've had this discussion. The sewer pays 100% of its debt. So the taxpayer, the general taxpayer, is not paying for costs associated with sewer. Sewer is self-supporting. It pays its own debt. It gets paid for out of debt service, but the money comes from the sewer fund to debt service to pay its own debt. So that's a change we've been working on for a number of years, and we're able to basically achieve that last year. Special sales tax, we have outstanding items such as our, aerial fire truck. We have a new ambulance that is on order. So those types of things will continue to pay for those equipment. Again, the special sales tax fund had 3 priorities. Fire, basically the fire department for the most part for rolling stock capital equipment, those types of things. It was for streets, and it was for parks, such as the items we approved tonight. We're again including $100,000 for street projects in here. That basically funds the second year of the seal project, so we can continue that seal coat project. Hopefully you've had a chance to drive on some of the roads that are done. We had hoped we'd have them all done before we walked in the room tonight. I think Woodin's our only outstanding road that we have left in Beach, excuse me. So we hope that'll be done pretty quick. So you'll see that. There's some money related to, again, what we talked about tonight. If we move to that second phase of the Riverfront Park, obviously that'll be a decision that comes back to you all in the CPPS board. Though we have some just basic improvements to shelters and things of that nature at our existing park. Again, we expect there to be a balance in this fund. At the end of the year, we're spending a little more than we're taking in a given year, but again, trying to fund some of those priorities. This fund, if the election, I believe, will have to occur 2024. So I know that sounds a long ways out, but probably within the next year, we should look at the reallocation of this fund going back to the voters. I think they overwhelmingly supported it before. If you look at what's been accomplished, we could not have done what we've done across the board without having the use of this sales tax here. So it has been a very effective use of those sales tax dollars. Special street fund. Again, this fund is created to account for basically fuel taxes. So it's the money we get through this. It actually goes to the state, to the county. It comes to us, but there's allocation methods here, right? So one of the things, or kind of 2 things that we're doing here. Number one, we've been using it to help pay for debt associated with roads. But again, as our debt fund has become healthy in the sense and that we're kind of on a bit of a downward projection, we don't need to move money from this fund anymore, and we can spend it directly on streets. So that's part of what we're funding on streets. 2, we've typically only put $40,000 or $50,000 in this fund to do general road maintenance, not necessarily big repairs, but some of the smaller repairs. We're able to more than double that, and we can do bigger repairs. So even with our crews, we can go out and do large patching. We can use contractors for larger patching, but this is part of what we have here. As you see, we'll still have a healthy balance in this fund, and we very well may want to expend even more money as we get into the 22 and 23 years, because this fund does get revenue into it each and every year. Now, the downside, which we're not unique, as vehicles have become more fuel efficient, and as we see more and more electric and other vehicles out there, at some point, state governments, again, nationally, are going to have to figure out a different funding mechanism, the federal government too, for funding roads, because whether that car uses gas or uses electricity and it's traveling down our street, the wear and tear on the street doesn't change. So there's going to have to be a change. I know there's, it's been a political hesitancy. How do you get there and what do you do? Some point that'll have to happen, or we won't be able to adequately fund roads in the nation, not even here, if you start chipping away in those dollars. So we have a healthy street fund. Dusty has his 6-year plan for the seal codes. We're doing a significant project on our 102nd Street this year into next, and some of the other roads that we've been talking about. So again, one of the goals was to increase funding to streets, and this was one of the areas we do that. Sewer fund, again, it's a self-supporting fund. Our single largest expense here is our contract with the unified government for treatment. That contract has specific dollars attached to that, so we know pretty much what our fee is going to be. As flows increase, we pay more to them, but the unit cost stays the same. There's a variable, there's a monthly cost, and then there's a variable cost, pretty much just like your bills at home for your utilities. You get a bill, in the wintertime, your gas bill goes up because you use more gas for heat. Summertime, generally your electric bill goes up because you use more for cooling. Ours is the same way. We pay a fixed fee and then we pay a variable fee, and at different times of the year you see some change. Overall, again, it's pretty flat. It paying its own debt. We've been able to start doing some more routine cycles. So for example, what we refer to generally as the Betts Creek lift station and the big lift station, those pumps have to get pulled and rebuilt. So instead of waiting for them all to go bad at once, we've been doing those cycles, right? One pump rebuild is $40,000-$50,000 on some of those pumps. Kind of depends what has to be done. So we don't want to wait for them all to go bad. So we're doing more and more of the routine maintenance on the sewer level. Solid waste, I think, as Zach has said, again, pretty straightforward fund. It's working well. I think our changeover to KC Disposal has been a good changeover. Like all garbage companies, they've had a problem here or there, a leaking truck, something, whatever. They've been very good to work with. We have a good contract with them. Again, we know what our expenses are going to be for the most part. We certainly are getting, I think on the bulky side, we're getting more service because they're able to do a curbside event as well as what we're doing here every year. So for the dollar spent on solid waste removal by the citizens here, we're able to upgrade that service a little bit with the contract that we have with KC Disposal. And of course, it is a local company as far as its base of operations is here. Some of the other funds, again, Eco Devo, generally speaking, we don't really base any revenues there. The revenues all come from the IRBs. When we have an IRB application, there's an application fee, and then there's an origination fee, because we don't know when those are going to come unless a couple of years ago, we knew we had one going to close like in January or February, but typically we don't have that much heads up that something's going to hit. So the Eco Devo fund, Revenue side, we generally don't budget for it, and then we adjust it. The expenditures around Eco Devo, generally speaking, pay for like our participation in the Wyandotte EDC. They have asked for an increase this year from, I believe, 12,000 to 15,000. I think we certainly get our money's worth from them. They do a lot of good work for us. You know, they can't solve every problem, but they do an excellent job, you know, around some of the big issues and help us when we're out trying to get new clients and or working with our neighbors. So, yes, sir.
Wyandotte EDC asking an increase for all 3 cities?
I believe for all of their public entities, they're requesting an increase. I can verify that before the public hearing, but yes. I'm fairly certain that was my understanding.
They typically do
Yeah.
cover everybody. They don't just single
Right,
one out.
yeah. So, but I'll verify what that is. Special events, really, this is where we pay for our, you know, our various special events, big one being Autumn Fest. Obviously in 2020, we didn't have one, so we certainly had prepared for that, but there's other special events that we prepare for each year, but Autumn Fest is the largest one. So we have that. Technology fund. The number one funder of the technology fund is on each citation that's issued. Shouldn't say issued. When there's a conviction on a citation, we have a technology fee. Most of the technology dollars have been spent in general times, have been spent around technologies involving courts and law enforcement and things, because that's where it's come from. But it also pays for our servers and for those items that are citywide. And so we do move money from general fund to the technology fund just for accounting for it. But this is where we pretty much pay for technology. Now, if an individual department says I need a new computer or I need to go buy some specific piece of software, that is built into the department thing. But the server, some of those services where we use a third party to do work and things like that goes there. If we didn't have our police chief and his technology knowledge, I would bet this would be double or triple, because I know he spends quite a bit of time on technology, probably more than any of us know, but he really does help us in that area. So we're fortunate to have him help manage that. Again, you know, I think what the staff came in here with kind of 3 priorities that we heard from the public and from the council. And that was, you know, let's put more money into roads. Some of it was money we'd already set aside. So we had the roughly 600,000 that we did in the 2019 bond, but because of 2020 and everything, we didn't spend it. And so now over the next 3+ years, we'll be spending that money down. Again, we've looked at how do we use money that's in the special street fund and put it into pavement versus debt. So again, we will continue to focus on streets. That sounds like that's been a direction. We've heard from all of you on a number of occasions. You know, we want to take care of the staff that's here. They do a great job for us. We know that we can't necessarily be the Leewood Overland Parks of pay, but we have to compete. And I think we've collectively with the council support have put together a pay plan and et cetera, that allows us to properly compensate our people. Again, we have 1.5 people here. I can't tell you when we've added a police officer to our budget. It's well over a decade, probably, as far as adding a staff member. You know, again, we want to not only be out on the streets, but we want to be able to solve those crimes. So I think the chief brought that forward, as he said, brought it forward many years. And I've probably been the guy to say to him, no, it's not this year. It's not this year. I think this is the year that is appropriate. Again, court is challenging. I mean, we have to take people to help in court, you know, the police service clerk or somebody from here to go help with the court. And then before and after court, as you all might expect, you know, everybody wants to rush in at the last minute and ask for an extension or continuance or pay, or they forgot to come to court and now the days after. And you know, we're running 200 plus cases every 2 weeks through our court with one person. She is on overtime every day. Right. I mean, we now schedule her overtime because we still got to get that stuff done. I mean, those tickets have to get entered, those warrants have to get entered, warrants that have been met have to get taken out, all these kind of things that goes through the court. And Angie's up there in her little cubicle over there by herself, does an amazing job, as has our previous court clerks. I mean, it is a very demanding job. And I think you would be hard pressed to find another city that has one person in their court that does even close to our kind of activity through the court. Again, just some of the capital improvements, excluding roads, right? We're talking about existing facilities and some of the things we can do to make those usable for the public. And as proposed, right, I know that mill and taxes and things have been an ongoing thing. I think it's something that's been over time requested, that how can we reduce our mill levies, but at the same time maintain or improve our services. So we feel like because of the growth in value this year, that a 1 mill reduction is a reasonable place to go. So that's really the summary of the budget. Again, what we're doing tonight by your actions is two things. Number one, setting, if you look on your notice of budget hearing, we are setting that maximum budget number at that roughly $10.7 million. And we are setting the estimated not to exceed tax rate at the 42.298, which is roughly 1 mil reduction over prior year. So that would be the action for the council, but happy to answer questions. We're not approving the budget tonight, but we are setting maximum. So whatever is set, that's the top limit. We can reduce it, we can adjust it, we can modify it, but those are our caps. So happy to answer questions.
How much is a mill worth, like to $150,000 home?
Do you remember that? I know we had ran.
I think it was $15 a year.
Well, as far as an adjustment, well, hold on a second. You have it up really quick there. I can do before I say something, then I'm wrong. So 100, just I'm going to go through it. $150,000 house is so that's its appraised value by the appraisal. It's then assessed at 11.5%, right? So we multiply that times 0.115. So that makes it assessed at $17,250. Mills are represent per $1,000. So you take the $17,250, divide it by $1,000, it gives you $17.25. If you multiply, now I'm assuming we're talking about the city mill levy, right. Correct? And if we use the current mill levy as we have today, that would be $746.93
Per year.
Per year. So about 60.
That seems really high.
Let me run the math again. So you said $150,000 home times 0.115. Oh, I think you're right. Then you divide by 1,000. Yeah. And then.
Yeah,
that's, I mean, total taxes, that's what I come up with on a 150,000 house, but am I missing my?
That per
I I'm missing something.
That's for the total?
No, that's for city. I'm just.
Yeah, okay, but how much per, so that, it can't be $70 a month.
About 62. I think that's about right.
Well, that would be the 42 mills or whatever, right?
Right.
Okay, so 1 mill.
Oh, 1 mil. I'm sorry.
1 mill.
That would be about $7.46
per month.
a year.
$7.40.
Well, if I take that, so that's at the full 43. Let me run it. I got you.
Just want to know what it,
I misunderstood what you were saying.
Basically, the easier question.
But at $17.25, yeah.
per
17.20.
year?
Yes.
Okay. Chief Whittam, how much would it cost to get the station up in the north end ready to occupy and to staff it and equip it?
Short order, cost restrictive. For the number of calls that we make up there, which represents less than 6% of our overall run volume. For this year, we've had 7 fire responses, of which 6 of them were illegal burning, and 11 emergency medical services calls. 11. For the 6 years that I've been here, we've had 4 deaths that were occurred to a medical emergency. That intervention within 3 minutes or 4 minutes would not have made a difference because they were discovered some 12 hours up to a week and a half later. When you sit there and calculate the response time that we have added onto the website, you're talking about $500,000 to $700,000 to modify a building that was built for volunteer firefighters that has not had an ambulance crew since July 1st of 2004, when KCK Fire took back over the ambulance from Mast Ambulance Service. When you look at $600,000 to $700,000, that is 8.75 mils alone, just to modify the building.
Okay.
Different staffing options that they've proposed. 2 personnel, one being a firefighter EMT and one being a firefighter paramedic. Is going to sit there and require 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Is going to require the addition of 7 full-time employees, 6 that you're going to have working every 3rd day, and an additional floater because our minimum staffing will increase. And right now, our minimum is our maximum number of personnel. That is an increase of $560,000 or 7 mils
Per year.
per year. Opening up and having a second ambulance up there, we have purchased a new ambulance for $256,000. Part of that $256,000 purchase price was selling one of the 2 existing ambulances we have. We would have to, at that point in time, also keep a 3rd ambulance in reserve. Another $256,000 adds on 3.2 mils. That is not including an increase for a normal operating budget of $98,860 just for the additional supplies, fuel, maintenance for those personnel, that ambulance that's up there, and that station. When that station was originally built, it was provided with 2 urinals, a pot in each restroom, and they've modified it when Mast moved in to put a shower in 1 bathroom. The building that they used to live in was originally designed to have 2 offices. It was never designed to be occupied 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This year alone, we have discovered that there's a septic system problem up there on that property that would have to be addressed. And when you sit there and look at the overall price, you're still not addressing the cost to the city. Where do you put public works? Before you can sit there and move a crew into overhaul, you would have to move everything out of public works. The building may have been bought and paid for. It has been occupied roughly 40 hours a week since 2004. It has not been occupied overnight. It has not been occupied when it's 15 below overnight to heat. So those questions are some variables that we do not have in there.
So we'd be looking at 20.5 mils for year 1, if I'm somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
And
For potentially 40 calls a year.
And then on an ongoing basis, we'd be looking at probably somewhere between 8 to 11 mils, something like that, just to operate it and staff it and so forth for the future.
Yes, sir. You're talking about an overall budget increase annually of payroll and personnel. That's just for putting 2 people. and an ambulance in there is almost 50% of what our overall personnel budget line item is right now for the existing fire department.
Okay.
Now, I know that they talked about response times. Our response time average is 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Last month, on the data that was released, was 4 minutes and 50 some odd seconds. That is from the time that dispatch tells us, not the time that we go out, from the time dispatch tells us till we arrive on scene. There was also a discussion of moving an ambulance crew from down here to eliminate the staffing problem and the crowding problem here to up north, where 94% of my EMS calls are south of K32 and below. Also in question since April, when the discussion was brought up about the trains, we have had 4 documented train delays of a train in motion, with 0 times that we've had to stop and go all the way around because a train has blocked all 3 tracks or all 3 crossings.
Okay, with all that being said, so we do know the development's coming up north.
Certainly.
And that we do have a need that's going to arise up north. I mean,
Correct.
I mean, I appreciate everything that was said and why it can't be done. Here's the next thing I'd like to try to figure out is how do we figure that out? Like you said at the beginning of your presentation tonight, we're looking at the future down the road. So how do we start thinking that this is going to work? And how do we plan for it? Now, I don't think that's the location for a fire department.
I agree.
In my opinion.
I think your public safety people, management, public safety would agree with that statement.
That was a good spot for, I think at the time for what it was used for.
Right.
You know, and, I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of a train actually holding us up to getting to help somebody.
Correct.
So I would like to know if there's some sort of measure or something that we can do that if we were to ever get in that position, we've got a train that's blocking them all. How do we reach out to another city? I mean, because we sure go out and help other cities a lot.
Correct.
How can we ask for someone to help on that north end?
And we have,
yeah.
So for and the chief can probably answer it, but so, I mean, we've had times when, you know, we need assistance or just more ambulance. So of course, the closest, I think one of the things I would say too, that old, you know, whatever you want to call it, medical station didn't just cover Edwardsville, right? It was masked and they covered an area. It included Edwardsville, but they also served other parts of the county at that time. So it wasn't a dedicated, as I understand it, somebody could correct me, it wasn't dedicated just to Edwardsville. It was masked and it served as part of the overall county EMS system at the time. So that unit could have been out of service in the sense it could have been it could have gone to Bonner, it could have gone somewhere else in KCK, it could have gone, you know, up to Piper, wherever it may need to go. So, you know, for us, the closest stations, and I know the chiefs work with both the chiefs, and, you know, Station 6, you know, maintains an EMS paramedic unit up there, which is then north of the tracks, right? And Bonner Springs, because their station where it's located is also north of the railroad tracks. And again, the same problem occurs the other way. If you got all your resources to the north, how do you get, you know, we've had this discussion years back then, you know, where do you position your apparatus? So again, I think currently, you know, we're running 1,000 calls a year, give or take, somewhere in there. Like almost every service, EMS is the #1 call service. We do maintain both our ambulance and our engines are paramedic based, right? So that's part of our staffing challenges at time, right? You got to keep a paramedic on both of those. But I think beyond, you know, those things, we do have other resources. We've used Medac out of Johnson County for emergency response. So I would say they're going to call on the resources necessary to provide service when the call comes.
So is it, I mean, I don't on a lot of things, I
Right.
think that you look to the council for some, things that you bring forward in front of us for us to vote on. But I mean, so is it an issue?
I don't believe based on you're saying about, is it a response issue?
Yeah. I mean,
Based
we
on
hear-
all
we
the-
hear
yeah.
these things,
Right.
and I
I-
don't have a way of knowing.
Right.
Well,
Well,
I heard the letter that was
Sure.
read tonight.
Mhm.
And I mean, it sounds like there's great concern, and I'd be concerned too if I was that bill. But, so what do we do to start planning for in the future? When we do know that there's
Right.
things that are going to require us to,
Sorry, Zach,
Yeah.
and I'm the biggest one on that mic thing about,
Yeah.
sorry. So what do we do to start planning for that? Or how do we start thinking about that? And I know that, there's no crystal ball and you can't just say, well, here's what we got. But, I mean, we do have to have public works. We need to get them relocated because that's not the place for public works. It looks terrible. And no offense, it's public works. That's what public works buildings have around them.
Correct.
Materials and trucks and trailers and skid steers and backhoes and mowers. But that shouldn't be in the entrance of one of you're going to come off our brand new road here coming from the north. And one of the first things you're going to run into is our public works building. Probably not the right thing to have. But I also would like to figure out, I mean, is it volunteers? Can we look at having something on the volunteer level? I have no idea. I don't know, work with volunteers up on the north end that we have an ambulance. I don't know. Is that possible?
Again, it goes back to staffing and changing that building's configuration to put staffing back in there. The building was built in 1989 for volunteers. There has never, other than being a parking garage, had volunteers run out of that building up there. From the data that I've gotten from people that were on the department that were on during that time, most recently, our most recent retiree, because the simple fact is people up there would not volunteer. Our volunteers that we have now in this city are college students at Johnson County Community College that come over to get practical experience, because the volunteers that we do get applications from here in the city cannot pass the background check that we hold them to put them in somebody's home. The other thing that's going to get into is we had a DOL case against us in 2016 over the use of volunteer EMS personnel working on assigned shift because you sat there and could not pay them more than what you're paying an hourly city employee at 20%. So hence is why we have our volunteers down to $5 a call. Simply put, if you're going to sit there and look at this concern, one, I will tell you that building is not the right location for any future development at all. Two, when we sit there and start seeing development occur, would be the time that we start sitting there and considering how much it's going to be in the long term of 5 or 10 years down the road. We're supposed to be on the back end of opening a hotel that was going to spur development that hasn't showed up. And during part of those talks was we wanted a station up there, we wanted staffing up there, we wanted everything else. I could not see, as a department head, let alone a taxpayer here, anchored on another $700,000 a year to sit up there for, that's going to equate to about 40 or 50 calls a year right now. As the call volume would to increase up there, or the number of personnel that lived up there in the rooftops, as that magic number, there's no magic number that says, oh, once you hit 1,200 or 1,300 calls, you have to look at staffing. It goes based off of your response times again with it, and what your ISO mandates and your NFPA mandates are for your response times. And right now, our longest time that we've had this year for a response, and this was not even a life-saving requirement, this was a stomachache type call. We did not respond with lights and sirens and had to go in and enter off of Riverview from 118th Street. Took a little over 8.5 minutes that we had. Back to the original question, if our crews are busy and they come out here and they start seeing tracks and trains that are stopped across the tracks, It's a matter of picking up the radio and saying the next closest ambulance, and dispatch is going to send the next closest ambulance. And then everybody all of a sudden just assumes that up there at Station 6, there's an ambulance. It's not guaranteed that every time that we call for an ambulance out of 6s, we get it. The last
Riverfront doesn't know Station 6 is at
95th and State.
Yeah.
Yep. We had to call for KCK to help with us earlier last year, as well as Bonner Springs when we had a rash of COVID cases. Med 6 was not available. We got a med unit out of 57th and State out of Quint 2's house, which was the next closest ambulance available. So it's not like we always are going to have one 2 or 3 minutes right there at 95th and State, you know. And then the other portion is if you're coming over from Bonner Springs. Right now, we've had an agreement in place since we've shut down 110th Street for any reported serious calls that are up there, that it's a dual agency response. That was prepared for prior to us shutting down the road because we had residents that lived up there. Again, you know, we would have to see some significant, not only plans come through, but actual pushing of development to sit there and then construe and say, at which point in time do we estimate that we would need to open up a station? The other aspect that you'd have to look at with fire station design, placement, and everything else is the availability of property. And if you take the about 200-acre tract that's right there just north of Riverview, south of I-70, you know, you're talking about the price tag of property is going to be driven through the roof. But again, as well, is if you were to sit there and put a lot of big box developments in, you're not making any quicker of a response time because you've got an increased traffic flow as well too. So,
I've always thought that the developers can help pony up, you know, as part of that, since they're creating the demand, is there's got to be a way to have a partnership with developers in that process. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know the legalities of it, but it seems like if somebody's going to come in and develop a profit generating organization on a piece of property, that it's not unreasonable to say, you're going to cost us some extra money to service this. How do we work together? How can we teamwork and put something together to where there could be like a smaller, you know, police station outlet, a fire station, where it could be a public safety closer to the needs of the center.
that is usually a agreement between, as part of the development process. The proposed development in Bonner Springs at 118th, or not 118th. Is it 118th?
Yeah, it's
State Avenue?
118th, yeah.
Yeah, has a spot for about an acre for a subsequent substation for the fire department. However, that's still, you know,
Still have to man it.
you still have to man it.
Yeah.
Then you're sitting there talking about those costs, and they're just earmarking an acre of property. You know, that's not including the hard costs to put something in.
I'm not gonna speak for Bonner.
No.
But I have heard just rumblings that there's a possibility that they are moving towards a full-time department and staffing that location. And that would
help a lot.
that'd help a lot.
I think I think it's important that the citizens know that this is not something that we don't recognize. That in a perfect world, it would be great to have something up north, and you know, we for 11 to 15 mills a year, we could have one with a big old lump sum of 10 or 15 mills to get it rolling. So everything has a cost involved with it, and there's it needs to be something that we consider for the future, that we put in our planning and our strategy as we move up on the north end. But you know, like I said, it comes with a cost, and we have to weigh that. And is it fair for the majority of our town to pay higher taxes so that a minority of the town can get faster service? And so those are all things. There's equity discussions. There's all kinds of things to discuss in that. I did this on purpose so we could get some numbers on the table, so that as a matter of public record, the numbers are out there. And so when those type of things are discussed, there's numbers associated with, there's a reality that this is not something we haven't thought about. This is not something that just all of a sudden came up and gosh, how come we didn't think about that? It's kind of like the roads. We've been thinking about roads for as long as I've been here. It's just we finally have some money to work with. And, you know, we have had a long-term strategy for the last 10, 6-10 years. It's not something that just snuck up on us. It's something that we knew it was going to be a problem. And we've been working towards that end. We're finally to the point where we can put some major money behind it. And we've got a public works director that has a passion for doing that. And so, anyway, I think it's important for the citizens to know that we're not ignoring things. We pay attention. We know we have a limited budget. We're trying, it's been a passion for a few people on the council to reduce the mill levy, and that's great. But that money, there's a cost to that. There's services that may not be provided as deeply and broadly as there would be if there was if the taxes were higher. Nobody likes more taxes. And as a matter of fact, 5 of the 6 of us live north of 32 highway and would be affected by a longer response time.
If I may, I'm just going to add just a couple of brief comments. I mean, I can assure you that Chief Woodin and I have had these discussions on more than one occasion, right? About where should a second location, I mean, at some point, I agree, and I know I've spoke to somebody, at some point, because fire is based, it's a fixed based response, right? So it's very dependent upon wherever that fire station, that place is. You look at how long does it take to get response, not by a big circle, but by road access, by time access, where your calls are, your type of facilities, right? So if I look at loss or sometimes loss of life, when you look at it in an industrial area, right, whether it's our town or another town, I mean, we're fortunate that most all of our buildings, if not all of our buildings in our industrial park, because of their age, are sprinkled, right? So they have sprinkler systems in them, right? You can go to an older town, parts of Kansas City, Kansas, that have, industrial users, but because of the age of the buildings, et cetera, may not have that same kind of safety in them because of when they were built. And that will determine, that would change how close a fire station or type of equipment or type of people need to be there, right? So we're looking at it from that standpoint. It's not all about calls, but we do look. I mean, where's the most likely places we're gonna go? And I, the gentleman with the son, I know we all, if we're having a medical emergency, and having worked in EMS myself, even being on the ambulance trying to get somewhere, it seems like an eternity to get there and get back and to care for people. So completely understand that. We would all like to be a little bit closer to those services when we need them. When we call, we want them there and we need them now. We don't call just because we want to call, we need them. And so we do have to use some standards. So the fire department, I think, we've looked at that. It's on the radar. It'll continue to be on the radar. The other thing that I would just add, on these kind of medical calls, and you've seen it here, we've had several of our police officers do life-saving awards because they were the first person there and started the proper intervention. They're not paramedics. They're not going to start meds, right? But they're able to maybe help stabilize a patient. They can do CPR. There's certain things that they're doing there as well. And of course, they're distributed. I mean, their method of response is distributed. They're not all sitting at one place waiting to go. So when we look at public safety and the need for these kind of things, whether it's an auto accident, a medical emergency, or whatever it is, you have more than just one ambulance going to take care of that. You have a whole resource of people that are out there. And I know everybody, in our police department and fire department have all worked together and been there, and different calls for different things. And, you know, as we like to kid our police chief from time to time, he even picked up a hose and put out the fire, you know, in the grass that was burning near the house, so the next house didn't get fired. So, hey, I think your staff is out there and they do what's needed to be done. Yeah. If I'm having a medical emergency and it's serious, I want a paramedic there. And that's why, you know, again, I think because of the decisions that have been made by this council and by the staff, that's, you know, when I would, you know, before we put an ambulance service in, right, we more of 84% of our calls were south of the railroad track, but now the ambulance was coming even farther away, right? And that's why we saw 10 and 12-minute response times on high-level critical calls, right? You're having a heart attack, 12 minutes is a long time. So, you know, part of the reason we put that in, as y'all know, is it was a financial decision, but it was also a response decision, right? That's why we can do 5 and 6 minute calls versus 12. So we're doing it in half the time it was before to the vast majority of our population. So again, it's not that we don't consider it. It's right there. Again, I can't remember how many times we've had these discussions. They're good questions. They're good points. When do you build another station? Where do you put other stations? Where do you put any kind of resource? I think your point about, and as Chief Woodin mentioned, you know, in some development agreements, right, there will be a dedication of land, or I know we've talked about TIFs in the past, right? TIFs, if it's in that district, certain, I mean, there's obviously legal matter. It can help to compensate those types of things. So there are options. We don't always just anticipate the only way to pay for it is let's pay more property taxes. I mean, we want to look at, you know, as we often talk about the three-legged stool, right? I mean, you really want to have some equality among your sales taxes, your property taxes, and, you know, other types of taxes out there. And then your fees, you know, your fees should be focused on recouping cost, right? I mean, you have a park and that's great, but if I want to come rent it to have a ball game out there, well, okay, the park is something that's good for the public, but if you want to turn on the lights and use up the stuff and you need somebody to go out there and be the referee and put chalk on the ground or whatever, or I want to close the street and I need barricades and I got to have a public works guy go over there and put them out and pick them up, then those are kind of costs that that group that's using those public services should pay for. And that's always been the model and is the model that should be, you know, followed in use. So
Well, just
with
as a
that,
matter,
that's just that's the summary I have for budget at this point, but happy to answer more.
just as a matter of clarification, 6 out of 6 of us live north. All of us live on the north side of the tracks. So we, you know, it's something that impacts every one of us as well.
7 out of 7 fire chief lives on the tracks.
Yeah.
And I can't state for others, but I do know that an ambulance once or twice has been to his home for medical services. So I'll leave people and names out for their privacy, but he has been both a provider and a user of services.
Thank you for indulging me. I appreciate that.
Hey, Mike, since we were on the topic, and you had mentioned that some of our police officers had responded even prior to our ambulance paramedics or EMTs, would it be worth looking into some other towns that maybe train their police officers or pay them extra if they want to get their paramedics license as an incentive to just have extra paramedics in our city?
Go ahead, Chief, if you want to answer.
Ms. Cahar, for you to look at having a paramedic in a police car, they're going to have to be sponsored by an agency. Not saying that the Edwardsville Fire Department would not sponsor it, but the Board of EMS in Kansas and the protocols has to originate whoever the ambulance provider would be for that. And then the other aspect that you have to look at is paramedic school can be anywhere between 16 months and 24 months long before you even would get them out there. And that's a brand new paramedic without any experience. So, you know, I cannot say that it cannot be looked at. However, it's not a rapid or easily replaceable function. And then the question it gets into is also the safety and security of the scene. When police officers are taken on CPR events, They are completely wide open to family turning on them, and we have lost our security when we walk in. Not saying that we are stating that police officers don't need to do that, but right now, with the faction of several items going on, most agencies that have had incentives for police officers for that have now dropped off due to the liability just being placed on that officer as well, due to the training requirements to upkeep a advanced medical provider license.
That makes sense. It sounds like it might be a little too much on that officer or on our liability. I was just trying to think out of the box for things that might provide a little quicker response time for the up north citizens. Chief Woodin, while you're there, would you remind me if you know off the top of your head what a typical response time is and what ours is compared to that?
Well, there's several factors that guide response times. However, when we look at NFPA 1710, it states that we have to have an ALS unit on scene 90% of the time in a heavily urban area in 9 minutes or less. We are averaging, like I said, about 6 minutes and 26 seconds. Last month was, or I'm sorry, June was 4 minutes and 58 seconds. When you get into rural and not heavily densely populated areas, that acceptable response time is stretched out between 12 and 14 minutes or longer, depending upon what the level of service is. Now, NFPA with 1710 is a recommendation that is acknowledged by this city only in parts, and that is due to the response times. We have also neglected and will not take on 1710 when it comes to some staffing issues. Back to Councilman Adams' concern is we would put an entire tax burden on the citizens, which would be almost unacceptable for the community of the size that we are at currently in our call demands.
Thanks, Chief. So we're about 3 minutes under the recommendation for response time on average.
Yes, ma'am. And like I said, you know, that is for a life-threatening emergency. When our dispatch is out on some protocol issues, such as something that is not a top 5 cardiac or difficulty breathing or possible stroke or major trauma, is not a major life threat, to where dispatching protocol could provide up to 30 minutes to an hour for a unit to respond. And that makes up several of our responses to where we're 8 or 9 minutes for a response time still. And that's not an emergent response going with lights or sirens. That is just getting in the vehicle, driving normal speed in traffic, getting up there and assessing the patient.
Thanks, Chief.
So again, Mayor, just to summarize at this point, you know, our action for this evening is setting the, you know, per the notice of budget hearing, effectively to set that total budget at, and I'll just read these numbers, at $10,783,505. So that'd be the maximum, and a mill levy of 42.298 based on, and this is really how it gets valued, of property taxes, both for the general fund and the debt service fund, of $3,507,834. And I believe that can be in a single motion, and I believe it needs to be. It can be, because what you're doing is approving this notice of budget hearing. I'm just giving you the numbers. It is a governing body, so all members would vote.
So in setting the public hearing, these facts need to be stated. Is that what?
I mean, I think you could reference this notice of budget hearing per the numbers I've given you, but the budget hearing would be at 6 p.m. August 23rd, 2021, here in this building. That is the public hearing, correct. There will also be, yes.
We can reduce or go lower. This is just setting the maximum amount. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to mention and make sure that I read it right, that our expenses are set to exceed our revenue by about $145,000. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I didn't know if we might be able to work over the next couple of weeks to try to get that number closer to a balanced budget. I would really like to see that. I know we're talking about a mill reduction, but I think it's really important that we work toward a balanced budget as we're planning for our future.
Okay, got that. Yes. We can look at that and prepare some options for discussion. And again, we will have a separate public hearing just for, you've already said it's already done, but you see this, which is kind of a new line item on this form where it talks about revenue neutral rates. So we will have a separate public hearing. That public hearing deals with whether or not you're going to exceed that rate or not. This public hearing that we'll have, ultimately sets the budget. And by setting the budget, you really do two things in budget setting. You set the expenditures and you set the total amount of revenue from property tax. That's really what in Kansas we do when we set a budget. We don't really set the revenues, all the other revenues. Obviously, we provide that to you so you can see that. And as I've said, I can't remember how many times, the way the state calculates everything, so you'll always see a little difference. The state assumes you're going to spend all the money that you collect. We always assume we're going to keep a reserve of 15%. So, and we'll go through that during the budget hearing, as we always do, to kind of show you why the budget you get in your packet, and you go, but our budget in our packet doesn't say whatever number. It's because this budget, as the state requires, assumes you will spend every dollar you collect. It doesn't assume you'll have a reserve.
So in that motion, it needs to have the projected mill levy of 42.298 and the 10,783,505.
That would be correct, yes.
My last statement is
I am one of those two councilmen, I think, that you were referring to, that has always said, I'd like to continue to see the mill reduce, and I'd like to see it go down even more. Now, with that being said, I would sure like to see our county level mill reduction is what needs to happen. And so that they kind of go hand in hand. We need to continue to work on our county mill levy coming down. Of course, I don't have any control over that county mill levy yet. But I do have it here. So I agree with trying to continue to lower the mill levy.
Thank you.
I think the school, the junior college would be another nice to have some control over the mill levy there as well. I'll make a motion that we set a notice of public hearing for August 23rd, 2021 at 6 p.m. for setting the maximum budget of $10,783,505. What did I say? Well, hey, that would be great. Yeah, 10 million. Yeah.
Thank you for the correction.
Yeah, 10. Yeah, that would make their next 2 weeks very difficult.
Yeah, we're firing you.
So 10,783,505 for the expenditures and 42.298 for the projected mill levy.
I'll second that.
I'm not going to repeat that motion, other than it has been moved and seconded that we set a public hearing for 6 p.m. August the 23rd, 2021. And with the statistics, the numbers that were mentioned in the original motion. So, and with that, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Malott,
Yes.
Stites,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Cahart.
Yes.
Okay, we're done. Except for you, Mike. Now it's your turn again.
You have the written report where, the only thing I would like to add to tonight, I really do want to thank our partners around the Union Pacific Railroad. Big Boy President. I mean, there's quite a few people there internally. Thank you. Internally, we had met collectively, kind of tasked our departments with working out a plan for traffic control, for safety. We had a water station up there. We had, fire trucks and ambulances stationed. So even with that event going on, we could respond where needed to be, and our departments all worked together very well. But I'd also like to thank our other partners, right? So the Union Pacific Railroad had law enforcement people there and worked together. I know we had the Historical Society there that was working with them, but we also had law enforcement from the Wyandotte County Sheriff's Department, and I believe from the Highway Patrol that helped us. There was signage out there. I don't know if that came from KDOT, but we had help from everybody. And when I was speaking with one of the public safety officers, special agents from the railroad, he was like, wow, this is nice. People are off the tracks. You all got the, he goes, I wish Lawrence did it this way. They did come from Lawrence. So I think they recognized, hopefully, that, the community can be part of that solution. We were a little concerned early on, but I think through discussions that were had from our departments to the other departments, that we had we really showed a great opportunity around the railroad. And to the best of my knowledge, we had no incidences. Everybody was able to move around safely. People tended to park, everybody parked appropriately. We didn't have people parking up in people's yards or where they shouldn't be. I mean, it seemed like it went off very well for however many hundreds or thousands of people were there, other than just being hot. So again, just wanted to thank to all those that worked with us to make this happen. Thank you.
Okay. Council reports. Garrett, I'm gonna let you go first. Imagine that. Caught you unexpected.
I don't go first very
Yeah,
often.
you do now.
I am aware of social media and things that are discussed on social media. And I think there's a lot of false information out there. I would really like to address the street situation in Edwardsville. I do know that the streets are very poor, and I agree with that. And we have tried, as what Councilman Adams was saying, we have tried to keep maintaining these streets. In the past, we had people that were city fathers and elected personnel that owned companies that made it quite a bit easier and maybe just a little bit cheaper to keep these streets up. It's been kind of hard. I've seen this town come from council members going out, putting signs up and taking wheelbarrows of asphalt out. I was involved in the very first public works director that we had on getting that department started. It was one person, and he had an old pickup truck, and he went out and did as much as he can. I don't know that our personnel has advanced that much, but I think that we've got quality people that are here right now. And with the report that was given to us as council members from the public works director, there are things that are going on right now. And I want people to be aware that these things are being addressed. They're not cheap and they're not easy to address, but I think that our director, Dusty's doing a pretty good job. And I think the employees that he's got doing a pretty good job. So that's just kind of what I wanted to say. And I was very proud that Edwardsville had the opportunity to have that train stop here today. That's a biggie. That is a biggie. And that should be plastered all over the local news media. And the way our public safety personnel dealt with that should be advertised out there also. So I want to commend all of you for that. So thank you. And that's what I have to say today. So thank you.
Carolyn, we're going to go to you. What?
I'm on mute. I'm unmuted hopefully now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you can. We can. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Mike just wanted to double check that we are still allotting 600,000 towards streets over the next year. Is that correct?
Yes, there is 600,000 allocated specifically for streets, predominantly capital types of projects, right? Overlays, significant mill repairs, those types of things. We have some money in there for just your typical, I'm gonna call pothole repairs or local things, but most all of that is for capital projects. Now, we don't have a specific, we're gonna say this road, this road, this road, but I think we've talked about a number of those. The first one we're doing in the current year is 102nd Street. So that project, we have a bid out that'll be coming, I believe, back to the next council meeting for full depth repair and full depth repairs. And then the plan would be to overlay the entire road in the following year. And of course, we've been doing work up on Kansas and 110th, and obviously we'll have 110th Street hopefully open by the beginning of 2022. So we can get into more details as we move forward.
Do we have a date set for the bulky item pickup for the fall?
He's stepping up to the microphone.
We don't have an official date set yet. It'll likely be that first weekend in November like it was last year, but we will set it with enough time so we can notice folks and get the word out that it's happening, but no official date set yet. The plan to be set at the same time and date that it was in 2020.
Okay. And then Mike, the community foundation, did you say that was ready to go, or there's more steps that need to take place so that if we have companies or development agreements coming about, that we can have that ready for them to donate to?
We could open it very quickly. It's actually a fund under there, so we could do that quickly. Basically, we haven't done anything to move it to that step just because there's no money in the fund. There are some fees, so if we didn't have money to put in the fund to start the process, we just held off on starting it. But it would not take probably less than a week to establish it.
Okay. And then I just wanted to reiterate, if at all possible, that we work over the next couple of weeks, if we're able to get expenses down a little bit to get toward a balanced budget. With property appraisals going up again significantly over the last year, I want to make sure that we are lowering or at least keeping even and not raising the tax burden on our people. It's possible to lower the mill levy and still raise their tax bill, and that's what I'd like to try to avoid. And that's all I've got for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck Stice, you're next.
So mowing of the cemetery, and where are we at from the last time that we were going to have some sort of monitoring or making sure how is that process going?
So I did perform just spot checks on their work over the last 2 weeks, and they have been doing a much better job blowing off the headstones and blowing off the passageways. We've actually had different members of the public who've reached out to council and to myself saying the same, that they are doing a better job of that. They only had one mow last week, and I do believe they did, at least when I was out there, it didn't look to be the scattered paper flowers decoration that were ran over. So they did some control of that by and large, and I'll update the CPPS board to the same effect, but they seem to have gotten that message and are working to improve those. I'll keep up the regular checks after their mowing for the next couple of weeks, but at least in this short term, they seem to have gotten that message.
And while you're standing up there, I'm going to hit you with another one. When will there be some? So the Halloween ride that we've been talking about, the UTV ride and such, will there be something? How are we going to be letting the public know about that, other than that Facebook page that we had spoke about?
So so to catch some of the other folks up in the room, there is a local Facebook page of kind of these UTV enthusiasts that I've made them aware that what we're doing is we're planning on continuing that neighborhood haunt event, which included a parade. And we do want them to be included, and it'll be, you know, a kind of, they can come in and decorate their UTVs, take part in the parade, to really add value to that event. As far as how we're building awareness for it, we're going to be using Autumn Fest. So we're going to have Autumn Fest takes place in about 5-6 weeks. We'll have brochures out that's going to have all of our activities out there that are planned for this year, and then kind of a broad look at what's planned for the 2022 rec calendar. But starting now that we're coming out of the summer and budget seems to be getting wrapped up. Now it's we're in that kind of the fall and the winter are where a lot of our events fall, and so promoting all that through our utility bills, through online social media stuff, to engage with those one-on-one groups that are more involved with it. So kind of a multifaceted approach to getting the word out best we can.
So will you start posting some things like on Hot Shot and start to look great? Okay.
Yeah.
Because
I think we've started about maybe not this last one, but I know at least 2 weeks ago mentioning the ATV piece of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. 9711 Steel Road, what's going on there?
We have had no response.
And this is the house that we granted the extension, and they're not responding to us now? And that date is up on?
But I think it's end of August, but we'll come back.
And is it just been, I mean, there's nothing, we've reached out and we're not getting anything back? Is that, okay? And I think that's important for us to know that process and prior to the 23rd getting here, and we go,
No, I mean, they were made aware of, so the property owner came in, had questions about, because he was a new property owner, bought it on the tax sale, didn't really know where we were at in the timeline and the actions we had taken. Staff updated him to where we were at this point, which required for demolition or abatement at the end of July. He came back, said he was wanting to, he wanted to rehab it, needed some more time. We said, okay, you seem to be working in good faith. We gave him that extension, made him aware that we're having that meeting 2 weeks ago to discuss this. If you wanted to come by and speak about your plans, he obviously did not do that. And since that point, I've not fielded any permit request or application at this point.
Contact with the building, or I also personally sent him, I believe, an email and I believe a telephone call, and received no response.
okay. Under the bullet point, under the police department, bullet point number 5, what's exactly going on here with that?
Well, our former CSO resigned.
So Claudia's resigned.
Claudia resigned,
Okay.
correct. And I met with the chief and said, I think this position, based on a lot of discussions we've had, is better to be within the police department.
Absolutely correct.
He agreed. We then put a job out there to the public.
Where was that posted? Because I don't know that I've ever seen that or heard that or knew or. So Claudia's role is not, so the abolishment of Claudia's role, I mean, I just seemed like something that would have came in front of the council if we're getting rid of a position.
Well, we're not getting rid of the position. We've moved the CSO, the community service officer, is simply being assigned to the police department instead of public works department. So instead of being under the direction of the public works director, that position is now under the direction in the police department. I don't know if that's the lieutenant or the captain.
Yeah, administrative, which is right now Lieutenant Brad Todd.
And
And the job is now going to be taken by a policeman that left our city as it
he
retired as a
retired,
policeman.
but he will not be in law enforcement. He's not.
It's a civilian,
It's a
non-sworn.
civilian, non-sworn position, just as it was.
2 different retirements.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
Not in
I don't
retirement.
believe he can serve in a law enforcement capacity. Certainly not with us because of retirement, but civilian do the same. So the CSO did code enforcement, animal control. Those were the primary 2 duties. When we first moved it to public works, its intent was that it would also help within public works. It didn't, I mean, there was times she did snow removal back a few years ago, but I don't think she's done it in the last year, or assist on a road project. But as we've been able to staff up public works, the focus has been back to what it's originally.
So how does that affect public works? I mean, because I know that you relied on her for a few things. I mean, it seemed like to me anyway. I seen her out there flagging and I seen her.
We used her a few times with flagging.
Yeah, we used her some flagging. Of course, we have been short one person almost the whole time. We're full staff now as far as the 2 public works position and my sewer operator or foreman that do our maintenance work essentially. But so that's helpful having that full staff. And there's ways to work around some of that flagging. Sometimes I get out there and help them do a little bit too, but for the most part, I don't think we're going to run into a big thing there. We are working with Doug on erosion control. That's something that she was kind of our boots on the ground for that, seeing those things coming up. Driveway permitting, things like that, that I would handle in the right of way. So we're still kind of working with the CSO. Really the flagging would be the main thing that we're not getting out of this, I guess. But
It's even the communities, community service. So when we have community service people, which we've had every Friday for the last month or 6 weeks, that person will be managed by the community service officer.
Which should be a police officer, in my opinion, not a community service officer. But, and we'll discuss that more, I guess, later on.
So fundamentally, as far as duties and responsibilities, they're not really changing. I mean, there were things that, there's, for example, community service officers out, sees a new building, sees a building being built or something being built. Community service officer would call back to permitting and say, is there a permit on file for this? Yes or no? And if not, then we would address.
I mean, same role as what the old
Yeah.
one did, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
should
So
have
we
been doing.
Yeah, we just felt that, I believe that it's a better fit in the police department. Some of that has to do.
No, it needs to be, yeah, it
Right.
definitely needs to be under the police
Yeah.
department. I totally agree with that.
Some of those things
Absolutely.
like animal control, some of it's just
10-day notices. I mean, we're gonna start,
all the things. that should
those
be done.
things need to, yep. Okay.
Some of it's technology, right? Radios, technologies like when it's under the police department, they can write a physical ticket. When it was under public works, they could prepare documents for the prosecutor then to notice people to court. So there are some advantages of having it in the police department because it's under the control of the police. So,
Yeah,
for
I get it.
example, she couldn't write a ticket in the field.
No, I got it. My brother does that
Yeah,
job in
yeah.
Bonner.
I understand. Yeah.
Got it. All right, thank you.
Okay, Chuck, your turn.
All right.
Wait a minute. You're excused. I won't call on you for any comments, okay?
Do we have an update on the fiber project, the CARES fiber project?
So the fiber project as it relates to, the CARES project as it relates to us is, I believe, complete. They put basically some equipment, but all the fiber itself is ran into our buildings now. They put switches.
Fiber panels are installed. That was the last piece of their contractor project. Then the next piece is the hardware, how it operates internally, firewalls, switches, things like that, and how it converts over from the fiber input to the distribution in the Cat5 system we have. So
But the fiber basically from the 911 center in KCK, right, is connected to here.
Okay.
The amphitheater is connected to kind of the bigger fiber loop. The part that didn't get done because mainly of timing is a connection that goes from here. So you may have seen them, they terminated it on 4th Street, short of the railroad track. So, and that school district had already decided not to participate, so they weren't going to go there. So the connection over to Bonner Springs and within Bonner Springs back to the amphitheater is not.
Okay.
But for us, all of our facilities, so there's a fiber connection in our community center, there's a fiber connection in the fire department, fiber connection, police/city hall.
Okay, great.
Part other than K32 and the 2 lift stations that are out there. They're small, so there's not a connection to those two, but they also ran a connection for our lift station on Woodin Redevelopment. Now, we're far from having the tools to use that technology, right? Being able to control lift station remotely and those types of things. But the physical piece of fiber is in, it's all ran up 98th Street. As far as I know, they pulled all the fiber. They had to have it done by end of month. So everything they had to have done for us.
Okay. And what about an update on the tower? Just right down here?
The last, I've not heard anything further. The last I understood, he had some outstanding fees and he's been making monthly payments on them, and that's the last I had. He did his SUP, he had some expenses with the county on the acquisition. And I asked about it for several months. Like, well, his SUP is going to expire. It's advised that, they're making payments.
Okay.
Paying for it. Anything happen. I can follow up.
Yeah, that'd be great to have an update on that. And, we've been blessed in the city for a long time with some really good residents and I really wanted to recognize Winifred Anderson. A couple times over the last 10 or 15 years, whatever it is, he has patched in some of the holes that his trucks help attribute or contribute to up on 102nd Street. And I really want to thank him for being a great citizen and helping and taking out some of those holes that you had to turn your lights on to get out of. So I do appreciate it. And he's been a model citizen for a lot of years and contributed to our city very positively. So just want to recognize that.
And I would add, so as part of our 102nd Street project, because we're doing full depth of that, so there's going to be waste material there, dirt and things like that. If I'm correct, he's offered to allow that material to be placed in that area that he's been filling at no charge to the city. So typically that would be an expense in a
Right.
project like that, right? So,
Excellent.
I mean, we're going to be working very near him, obviously.
Right.
But I mean, through that whole, and I believe that was an offer. So, yeah. 10 or $15 a yard, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to
Yeah.
publicly thank him for his contribution to it. Yeah. Great. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you all. Mike made a comment a while ago regarding the railroad. And just for your information, the proclamation that I read tonight was prepared not only by Zach, but it was prepared by the Historical Society. And upon their request, we did this proclamation for the Historical Society as well as for the city of Edwardsville. And so thank you all very much for all your input. And with that, we are adjourned.